You had a few videos out recently about a trip to Egypt that you took. And
Yes.
so you came back and just told a lot about the iconography that you saw in, well, just Egyptian iconography and how you saw the same iconography and symbolism in the Bible.
Yeah.
And so how can understanding specifically Egyptian iconography or just cultural concepts, how can that help our understanding of the Bible or specifically the book of Exodus? Yeah, how does this help our reading,
Yeah.
especially of Israel's cult?
I've noticed that my students are a little uncomfortable with this topic when I start showing them Egyptian images and telling them, look, Egyptian temples are kind of like the tabernacle. They have garden imagery. Look, they have a starry night sky over their head, just like it would have been if you had the blue curtains of the tabernacle over your head with gold flecks in them, and the lights are shining, and it would look like a starry night sky. Or look, the Ark of the Covenant is a really fancy box on poles carried by priests, and it has a symbol of the deity on the top. So we've got cherubim. Look, here's an example from King Tut's tomb where he's got the god Anubis on top, and the priests would have carried it. And they're kind of like, I need the Bible to be really unique and
Yeah.
different, and you're telling me it's just like the Egyptians? Like, why would God do that? Why wouldn't he do something entirely new? Why doesn't God just like show up in a Tesla? And so I want to say, okay, God is not copying the Egyptians. God is communicating. He's a master communicator, and he's communicating in a cultural context in which worship has taken particular shape. It's mediated in certain ways. And so he's working within that framework of understanding and saying, hey, stop thinking about these other gods, stop going to their temples, come and worship me. And he uses enough of the symbolism of these other temples so that they know that what they're doing is worship, and that it's replacing that thing they saw in Egypt. So I think the similarities are meant to communicate clearly that God has defeated the gods of Egypt. I think there are also significant differences. We don't actually have an image of God. We have cherubim, and cherubim, even in Egyptian iconography, these winged creatures, they hold their wings around the cartouche of the pharaoh, or the name of the deity, or the image of the deity. They're not the deity. They're like the protective figures around the deity. And so it would have signaled, in the shape of the Ark of the Covenant, would have signaled, we don't have an idol that represents Yahweh. He's asked us not to do that. We have an empty space where we would expect an idol. And the reason, I think Tim Mackey says it really well in his Bible Project video on the image of God, God doesn't want an idol because we are his images. He's created us to represent him as his physical reminders of his presence and rule on earth. So he doesn't want a dead stone, metal, whatever statue to represent him. So there's lots of similarities. Even the shape of the tabernacle mimics the war tent of Ramses II. They're the same dimensions, the same proportions, with an outer courtyard and inner tent, with a third of that inner tent being a square throne room. And Pharaoh Ramses II was so proud of this tent, and so proud of the Battle of Kadesh, which is when he used this war tent, that he decorated. It's the most highly advertised battle in all of he decorates like 4 different temples with scenes from that battle and the outline of his war tent. So no matter where you lived in Egypt, you would have been aware of this and aware of his claim to have single-handedly defeated his foes at the sea. And then you have God taking his people through the Sea of Reeds, defeating Pharaoh. If it's Pharaoh Ramses II, which I would suggest it probably was, he's actually beating Pharaoh at his own game. He's one-upping him, and then he's got this elaborate tabernacle that's built to replace Pharaoh's war tent. So I find that super fascinating.
Yeah, we've gone through multiple points just as we're going through talking about different through Genesis creation stories, flood stories, the tale of two
Mm-hmm.
brothers,
Yeah.
Akkad, things like that. And so, I like to use the example of like there are 100 different Cinderella stories in our culture, and none of
Mm-hmm.
them are the same. They all tweak little things to show us something new, teach us something new, and that's
Mm-hmm.
that's
Mm-hmm.
what's going on. So
Yeah. Yep.
yeah, hopefully, whoever's listening to this is very comfortable with that idea by this point. But I mean,
Yeah.
that is so cool just seeing. I mean, yeah, there's a few of those I've heard you mention before, and others there that were new to me. Just seeing how it's all taking their concepts and saying, oh, Yahweh's on top of it and plus
Yeah.
one.
Yes, totally.